Hey guys, once again, I am going to be working for the first time on something that I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just winging it. I feel like I'm such a hot mess when it comes to these videos sometimes, but the geode that I recently did while I was looking for pictures of actual geodes to see, exactly what they looked at, I ran across pictures of Rose Quartz. And Rose Quartz is a beautiful gemstone that I absolutely love. So I decided, why not try to do a Rose Quartz tumbler? So that's what I'm going to attempt to do with this. So I've got this wine tumbler. This used to be a sublimation wine tumbler that Robin gave me a long time ago that the finish started chipping off on it because I put it in the dishwasher all the time. So I decided I needed to make something pretty for me out of it. And it's like, well, I am going to do this beautiful little wine tumbler. I don't drink wine, I drink tea out of these actually. This beautiful little wine tumbler, Rose Quartz. So what I've done is I've painted it this pale pink. It's called blush pink, and it's the chalked spray paint. So it's like an ultra matte pale pink. So I'm going to, just for some depth and interest, use pink Sherbet alcohol ink and just randomly place it all over the place. And I'm just going to dab it in, and I just want to just get some interest in places to put my veining lines. So it's just going to just pink it up a little. And I'm just going to put the ink on my little foam sponge. I use, when I'm doing alcohol ink, I find the best thing to use is these mini blending foams from Ranger that are they're in the same aisle as the alcohol inks at Michael's. I find they work way better than the makeup sponges that some people try to use on the cheap, because the makeup sponges actually end up absorbing too much of the ink, and these are actually made for the job. So why not use the tools that are made to do the job that you're wanting to do? So that, like, it blends so nicely. I'm not sure if you can see that with the light. And I'm not doing, it might look like it, but I'm not actually intentionally doing full coverage on this. I do want this chalked pink to be poking through in areas, because otherwise, why did I paint it that color? So you can either put drips onto the foam and then and then when I'm doing it, I'm turning it all the time back and forth, just so I'm not getting the same exact pattern as I'm dabbing on. And that's how I do, even if I'm doing like an alcohol ink marble, pastel marble. I do that, but I generally do 3 or more colors. And for the pastel, I use the pink Sherbet, and I use Cool Perry, and Cloudy Blue are the 3 colors I use to do a pastel marble cup. And so making this all 2 different shades of pink here, well, it actually ends up being more different shades of pink because that's the way alcohol inks work, but by using these different shades of pink, I'm going to build some depth. And this isn't exactly as light as Rose Quartz will be, but Rose Quartz tends to be, it can be different shades, and we'll get it the veining is going to do a lot, because I'm going to do a lot of white veining throughout this, but for right now I'm going to do this and get it kind of organic. Also, when I hold my sponge, I hold it kind of pinched between my fingers so that I don't get the edge of the sponge making a line where it's hitting. Okay, so I've got this all on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take, because I want that to be just a little lighter, I'm going to take some straight up 99% alcohol, and I'm going to saturate my sponge a little bit with that and start lightening it up a little bit. Not everywhere, but in a lot of places. Because you can see the alcohol lifts the color. So I just want some depth with the pink. I mean, light pink is a hard thing to get depth out of. So I just want some depth, and I want some lines that I'm going to follow when I'm doing my veining. So you can see how the alcohol has already changed. Look at that. It's soft and pretty. And you just keep working it until you have it looking the way you want it to. So I've got one spot that like it's beautiful and blurred, and then I have another spot over here that's just a little too rigidly. So I'll just keep working that section until it opens up and starts giving me what I want it to look like. Because alcohol ink, if you just keep working the problem, like if you have a problem with it, if you just keep working back and forth with it, you're going to eventually smooth out your problems. And you can work back and forth with the alcohol and the ink. If you take too much color away from a section, you can add more ink. But Rose Quartz is just such a soft color, or soft stone, that you just want to keep working that until it gets to be all soft and pretty. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to seal this with a layer of Mod Podge, because what happens with alcohol inks, I might even do Kmart varnish on this. What happens with alcohol inks is that sometimes they change color, sometimes they don't. It depends on really the ink and the color, because some colors change. It doesn't matter what people tell you about oh, I just wait for 24 hours or 48 hours or whatever. If you ever want to see it, I have actually a picture. I did a water bottle, and it was brighter colors, but it was I sealed it except for one section. One section I did not seal, just to do it as a test, because it's like, okay, well, everybody keeps saying this, so maybe I don't need to seal it, because I took a class on alcohol ink art at an art supply store, and it's like, maybe I don't need to seal it. And because everybody keeps saying you only need to let it dry for 48 hours. I've never had a problem. Well, it turns out that I have this picture of a cup that I was doing, and I sealed all but a portion of it, and that portion, 2 turns after I added epoxy, was completely and dramatically a different color than the places where I did seal. So you need to seal your inks. You need to protect your work. You need to stop trying to find shortcuts. A lot of people, I'm not saying necessarily you specifically, but a lot of people try to find shortcuts with this stuff. And really, doing things like this, it's an art form, and we need to, first of all, value the time and the energy and the effort that we put into these things, and protect our work. So so protect your work and seal it. Alcohol ink artists use a thing called Kmart varnish, Kamar, and you spray like 3 coats of that over top of your ink, and then you have to seal it with clear spray paint, because any chemical, epoxy, spray paint, whatever, can reactivate the inks. And when your inks get reactivated, they can change color, they can blur and run, they can do any number of things, and it's not worth it. Why risk it? Why spend all this time like doing a wood grain or doing something like this why spend all the time doing it if you're not going to protect your work? So that's my PSA of the day. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to seal this, and then I'm going to put a layer of epoxy on it before I consider doing my veining. And my veining, I'm going to use a combination of white acrylic paint and alcohol to achieve a deep veining effect. So here's hoping that it works out, and I just love my little experiments. We'll go from there. So I will come back with a nice shiny epoxy cup. Okay, I have epoxy on this, and again, I spray painted it with a chalky matte pale pink, and then used alcohol ink on here for depth of color. And so now I have thinned out acrylic paint, white acrylic paint. I've just thinned it with some water, and so it just allows it to flow a little bit better. And now alcohol has kind of a melting effect on acrylic paint. I'm not sure if I mentioned that previously, but that is kind of what it does. And you can see I've started trying to make this happen, and I'll try and fix this up a little bit, but just as an experiment to make sure it would work before I started filming it, and so that you don't have to watch me do the whole thing. So I'm just going to I have this little brush. It's just a small, it says 00 on it. It came in a package. It's just a cheap, small little brush. I also have a teeny tiny little brush, like a liner brush. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 zeros. So this one's only 2 zeros. So it's like a tiny little eyeliner kind of brush, and then I'm going to maybe use, maybe not. So in here I have my thinned white acrylic paint. I could maybe have it a little thinner, but I didn't want to be playing around with the consistency, because if I add too much more water, then I'm going to have to add more white paint. But you want it to at least drip, and you want it just makes it flow a little bit better. And then in here you can't see it because it's clear. I have some 99% rubbing alcohol, and so what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the same brush for the whole process here, is I'm going to take it, and I'm hoping you're going to be able to see what ends up happening here, and I'm just going to rotate my brush in between my thumb and my forefinger, so it goes wiggly lines, and just make veins off of this, and just use a really super light touch, and it gets really thin, and just keep doing that. And then I'm going to dip into the alcohol, and I'm going to run my alcohol along my lines. And you can kind of see, like, the reason to do this is it kind of melts the paint outward and makes it kind of a milky effect as it's melting. It's a little too spidery for me, but I'll just keep working this with the alcohol. And you can see it kind of bleeds out a little bit. I'm not waiting for it to dry or anything, although thinned acrylic paint will dry very quickly. I'm just brushing along the same lines. I'm going to go over them, a couple of times, but it just the wetter the paint, the better the effect of the melting into this creaminess that is going to become a part of the rose quartz look. And if you look at a piece of rose quartz, there's a lot of depth in the veining. You have deep in white veining, and then you have on the top white veining. And you want this to come from different directions. So it's not all the same thing, because it doesn't look natural if it's all going the same direction. Let's do this nice deep one. You can see how it just kind of trying to make it so you can see how it melts. And if you don't like how it's turning out, you just keep going over it with more alcohol. It'll eventually disappear. I'm looking for different depths of lines. If you take too much away, then you just add more. It's just going to randomly be that way. And like most things with epoxy, when we go to epoxy over this, it's going to change the look of it. So you can kind of trying to get it so you can see how it goes kind of foamy on the edges with the alcohol, and then the background gets kind of a milky kind of color over top of it, so it lightens up the pink underneath. I just want just a super, you can bring your brush into a little bit more of a point. I just want a super light touch. And you don't need veins all of the places, but rose quartz has a lot of veins in it. Let the alcohol do its job in thinning things out. And just follow along. You can do broken lines. And I'm just kind of going all over. And grabbing my alcohol, using the same brush, don't just clean it off in between. Some areas you can have more and some less. Make sure you hit the bottom as well, because you don't want to forget your bottoms, unless you're not doing your bottom at all, but If you are, then you need to make sure you drag the veining down there too. And just keep the zigzaggy rotating it in between your thumb and your forefinger. That makes much more natural lines than if you try to paint with just holding the brush straight. That's also how I do my veining on my alcoholic marbles. I just put a little bit of the gold or rose gold alcohol ink onto my toothpick and rotate it between my fingers. And I don't want to lose some of the depth that I have with the paint job that I did, so I want to make sure that I don't cover up all of that. And I don't want any of my lines looking like I just painted that. You can kind of scrub a little bit and it just kind of feathers out. And the wetter the paint, the better the effect. This is actually inspired by a nail tutorial I saw that I wanted to show my nail tech. But she doesn't usually have acrylic paint in her nail salon, so there's that. Okay, this line is just looking too much like a painted line, so I'm just going to take the alcohol and scrub it. Just a little too much white right here, so again I'm just going to take the alcohol, scrub it, and you can see what's moving there is the paint, and I want to make sure I blend that out a little bit so it doesn't look like I just painted that. I discovered that alcohol melts acrylic paint when I tried to do a touch-up on an alcohol ink marble cup that I was doing. There was a spot that ended up having the paint lift on it or something, I can't remember, but I had to add just a tiny spot of paint to make my cup work, my design work, and the alcohol in the ink ate right through it. Okay, well, I think that this is looking pretty This is just a baby wipe that I'm using to try and, because I've got some spots where I've got a lot more white than I want from the creaming out of it. And so if I wet it with alcohol and get it able to be picked up, I can wipe it away. Just want a little bit more of the pink showing through in those spots. Okay, well, I think, because I don't want it all to be exactly the same all the way around, because, you know, I want as natural a look as I can get here. So I have some deep lines and I have some not so deep lines, and like right now it's looking okay, so I'm going to add some epoxy. Now it's not gonna, if I add just clear epoxy, it's gonna add to the rose gold effect, or the rose quartz effect a little bit, just make it shiny. But because I like shimmer, I'm gonna throw a little bit of Kasper, which is from Pressing Images. It's called Kasper, and it is just like the best ultra fine shimmer adder that I know. So I could also use an eco glitter or whatever, but I just want that little bit of sparkle to add to all of this. So I'll come back after I throw my epoxy on.